Imagine Batman's always be prepared rule, but with a Renaissance upgrade, and never tell them your plan. That's Machiavelli in a nutshell. Today we unpack his stop being open strategy, why he thought transparency kills power, what top scholars say, how other philosophers chimed in, and why his advice still outsmarts modern leadership books. Florence, 1513. Machiavelli's out of a job, accused of conspiracy, tortured, and exiled. The man's LinkedIn would have been a tragedy. Alone on his farm, he writes The Prince, a survival manual for rulers. His verdict? Men judge more by the eye than the hand. Translation: people believe what they see, not what's real. Sometimes the smartest move is to smile and keep quiet. Scholars like Quentin Skinner at Cambridge and Erica Benner at Oxford defend him. Not a monster, but a realist. He knew total honesty in politics is like playing poker with your cards face up. Nietzsche later agreed, greatness wears masks. Carl Jung added, protect your psychic core. My translation? Never live stream your secret plan meeting unless you want a trend for all the wrong reasons. In Chapter 18, Machiavelli unveils the optics over openness rule. Appear virtuous, merciful, faithful, humane, upright, religious, but don't always be so. Why? Because people buy the image, not the reality. This isn't about recreational lying, it's about survival. In a world of rival armies and scheming neighbors, openness is like leaving your castle gates unlocked and then going on vacation. Promise keeping? Machiavelli says yes, when safe, no when it hurts the state. And if you break it, have legitimate reasons ready. Think fox for detecting traps, lion for scaring wolves. The genius is knowing when to switch between the two without a grand announcement. In other words, change tactics like a pro, but let your rivals keep guessing. Be honest. If you were running a kingdom, would you share every move with your enemies? Or keep them guessing? Drop your answer in the comments. And if Machiavelli's sly survival tips have your curiosity hooked, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next cunning chapter. Now, let's talk about the plague of flatterers and why Machiavelli said to keep your counsel tight. Chapter 23 warns, avoid being open to everyone, especially advisors. Open courts are breeding grounds for flatterers. They'll tell you what you want to hear, not what you need. Machiavelli's solution? Keep a small circle of wise advisors and only let them speak when asked. Sounds harsh, but in politics, unsolicited advice can be the Trojan horse of bad decisions. Why limit counsel? Because too many voices blur focus. Machiavelli had seen the Florentine Republic crumble under indecision and bad influence. A ruler must filter input like a chef choosing ingredients, carefully, selectively, and without letting the whole market dump into the pot. And if someone says you're too closed off, congratulations, you're doing it right. Nietzsche would cheer this move. He once said, the higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Keeping counsel tight is about altitude. It keeps your thinking clear, away from the noise. Carl Jung would call it maintaining a psychic boundary, protecting the self from intrusion. I call it, don't let randoms edit your life script. But here's the curveball. Machiavelli doesn't say to hide everything. Chapter 21 is the flip side. You must sometimes declare openly. In wars or alliances, neutrality makes you look weak. Commit publicly to allies so they trust you. Enemies will fear you more. The key isn't never being open. It's knowing when openness builds strength and when it destroys it. Example, the Romans and the Achaeans. Machiavelli praises the Achaeans for picking a side rather than sitting on the fence. In his world, indecision was the political equivalent of ghosting a friend during a crisis. Nobody forgives it. Openness in this sense isn't about spilling secrets. It's about making bold commitments visible when they serve your power. Quick poll. Are you more of a keep my cards hidden player or a lay them out kind? Let me know in the comments. And if you're learning something new about Machiavelli today, hit that like button. It helps more people find these Renaissance survival tips. Now, let's meet the master of staged openness, Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia was Machiavelli's favorite case study. Think of him as the Renaissance's smoothest chess player, with real swords on the board. He faced a chaotic, violent Romagna region. His move? Hire a ruthless enforcer, Ramiro de Orco, to crush disorder with an iron fist. The people hated it, but order returned. That was phase one of a bigger, far more calculated play. Phase two? Once the people were sick of cruelty, Borgia had de Orco executed in a public square. The crowd saw mercy, justice, even compassion. What they didn't see was the deeper truth. Borgia had staged the whole arc to appear as their savior. This is Machiavellian non-openness. Hide the plan, reveal just enough, and make the reveal work entirely in your favor. Scholars like Sebastian de Grazia point out that this isn't mere brutality, it's narrative control. Borgia's actions show Machiavelli's belief that perception is half the battle in politics. Nietzsche might grin here. All credibility, all good conscience, all evidence of truth comes only from the senses. In other words, people believe what they see, not the hidden machinery behind it. There's also a theatrical side to this. Machiavelli understood politics as performance long before media spin doctors existed. In The Prince, Borgia's arc is essentially a stage play with two acts, fear and gratitude. Both work because the script is tightly held until the perfect moment. That's the art, never giving your audience the plot twist before it lands. Compare this with Sun Tzu's advice in The Art of War. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Conceal your dispositions. Two thinkers, worlds apart in time and geography, yet both agree. Openness is for after the victory, not before. Machiavelli would just add a wink and say, make sure your reveal makes you look like the hero. What about you? Would you pull a Borgia? Stage a plan so your rivals never see it coming, then flip the script? Tell me in the comments. And hey, if you're enjoying this mix of Renaissance drama and political philosophy, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next mind twist Machiavelli has in store. Next, why the military is part of this secrecy game. Machiavelli wasn't just about court intrigue, he obsessed over military strategy. In chapters 12 to 14, he warns rulers against relying on mercenaries. Why? Because hired soldiers can't be trusted. They fight for coin, not loyalty. And the minute your enemy offers them more, your plans are toast. In other words, mercenaries are the political equivalent of friends who vanish on moving day. His solution? Citizen armies, men of your own state, trained in peace to fight in war. And here's where secrecy slips in again. Armies are as much about perception as force. If your enemies don't know your true numbers, your supply lines, or your tactics, you've already gained an edge. It's the fox and lion principle, now armed with pikes. This thinking gets expanded in his dialogue, The Art of War, where a fictional captain explains the value of deception. You don't march straight at your enemy shouting your plan. You feint, distract, and strike where least expected. It's the Renaissance version of faking left and going right, only instead of a basketball, it's a battlefield. Modern military doctrine still echoes this. Clausewitz, writing 300 years later, agrees. Uncertainty is a weapon. He famously said war is the realm of fog and friction. Machiavelli would have loved that phrase. Fog hides your moves, friction slows your enemies, and both are easier to create when you're not an open book. Scholars like Gabriele Padula point out that Machiavelli's secrecy wasn't just about hiding bad deeds, it was about securing the state against chaos. In a republic or a principality, unpredictable enemies make openness dangerous. If your survival depends on timing and surprise, your lips and your counsel's lips stay sealed. That's not paranoia, that's policy. So, quick check-in. Do you think secrecy in leadership is outdated in our transparent era, or is it still essential? Let me know in the comments. And if you think you already know Machiavelli, stick around, because we're about to dig into the philosophy wars over whether he meant any of this seriously. Enter the scholars. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy frames Machiavelli's non-openness as part of virtue, the skill of shaping fortuna, to your will. It's not about being bad for fun, it's about winning in a bad world. This distinction matters because for centuries, critics painted him as the guy who taught rulers to be villains. Cambridge historian Quentin Skinner says Machiavelli's real project was freeing political thought from moralistic handcuffs. In other words, stop pretending leaders can survive by being open saints. Erica Benner takes it further. She argues the prince might even be ironic, subtly warning citizens about how tyrants operate so they can spot the tricks. If true, that's some next-level double play. Isaiah Berlin famously read Machiavelli as revealing two clashing moral worlds, the Christian ethic of humility and the civic ethic of survival. In the civic world, openness isn't a virtue, it's a vulnerability. Nietzsche liked this idea. He thought telling the truth in every situation was the mark of the weak, not the strong. Carl Jung brings a psychological twist. Openness can flood the psyche with projections, other people's fears, hopes, and manipulations. Without boundaries, you lose your center. It's like leaving your emotional castle gates open and inviting every traveler to redecorate your throne room. Machiavelli would nod, pour a glass of Chianti, and say, "Exactly." So while the packaging looks different, political realism, moral pluralism, depth psychology, the takeaway's the same. Total openness in hostile territory is asking to be conquered. And for Machiavelli, every territory is potentially hostile, which means yes, your safest bet is still controlled disclosure. Let's stir the pot. Do you think Machiavelli was genuinely giving rulers dirty tricks, or was he warning the people about them? Drop your theory below. And if you're loving this mix of history, philosophy, and slightly dangerous life advice, subscribe so you're here for part 2 of our Renaissance survival kit. Back to the prince. Chapter 15 is where Machiavelli drops the effectual truth bomb. He'll write not as moralists do, but as things actually are. That line alone was enough to scandalize his era. Imagine telling a 16th century ruler, "Hey, I'll teach you how the sausage is made," and it's not pretty. And here's where stop being open turns from tactic to worldview. If you operate in the effectual truth lane, you stop announcing your ideals like banners. You measure every disclosure against one question: will this strengthen my position or weaken it? If it's the latter, it stays locked away. That's not deceit, it's discipline. This discipline isn't cold-blooded in Machiavelli's eyes, it's necessary. In chapter 25, he uses the metaphor of fortune as a river. You can't stop the floods, but you can build dikes and levees in advance. Your openness is part of that floodgate system. You open them only when it's safe to let water through. Modern leadership studies, Harvard, INSEAD, LSE, actually back this up. Research on strategic communication shows that leaders who reveal everything early lose leverage. Timing is everything. It's the corporate world version of Borgia's staged mercy. Release the info when it wins you points, not before. But Machiavelli's advice comes with a silent warning. Once you lose control of your narrative, it's nearly impossible to get it back. In politics, perception sticks like wet plaster. Openness in the wrong moment can define you forever. Ask any modern politician who said one unfiltered sentence into a live mic. Quick audience check. Have you ever said something too soon and instantly wished you hadn't? Imagine that, but with an entire country on the line. Share your most regrettable overshare in the comments, and stick around, because next we're talking about the fine art of mixing openness with theatrical timing. Machiavelli didn't hate openness, he just treated it like a rare spice. Too much ruins the dish, too little leaves it bland. He wanted rulers to measure it carefully, sprinkling it in moments when it turns the crowd in their favor. Think of it as strategic vulnerability, centuries before TED Talks made that a thing. He also understood the scarcity effect before behavioral economics gave it a name. Information that's rare feels more valuable. If you're always telling everyone everything, your words become wallpaper, always there, rarely noticed. Hold back, and suddenly, when you do speak, people lean in. Aristotle, by the way, would have disagreed. In his Politics, openness and participation are virtues of a healthy polis. But Aristotle didn't live in a time when the Pope might invade your city next week. Machiavelli's Florence was an arena, not a symposium. Different worlds, different rules. This is where modern readers often trip, thinking Machiavelli's rules apply to all relationships. They don't. He's talking about contexts where power, survival, and reputation are at stake. Your book club probably doesn't need you to hide your real opinion on the muffins. Your diplomatic mission to a hostile state, very different story. And here's the kicker. When Machiavelli does tell rulers to be open, it's always calculated. Declaring for an ally isn't just about honesty, it's about showing strength, discouraging enemies, and inspiring followers. That's the kind of openness that pays dividends, not debts. Time for a vote. Should leaders today follow Machiavelli's secrecy rules, or does modern democracy demand total transparency? Let me know in the comments. And if you've stuck with me this far, you're officially part of the inner circle. Subscribe, and I'll keep the good stuff coming. In the end, Machiavelli's stance on openness comes down to three principles: control the image, time the reveal, and protect the core. The rest is situational. Sometimes you roar like a lion, sometimes you creep like a fox, and sometimes you just smile and let people wonder. For him, survival wasn't about being liked, it was about being effective. If that meant hiding intentions, so be it. If that meant revealing them for strategic gain, even better. The point was never moral purity. It was stability in a world built on shifting sands. Other philosophers might flinch at this pragmatism, but Machiavelli didn't flinch at much. He'd seen enough betrayals, invasions, and political whiplash to know that noble openness often ends in noble defeat, and he wasn't in the business of writing manuals for losers. In modern terms, his advice is like cybersecurity for your plans. You share on a need-to-know basis. Nobody posts their bank PIN online and calls it transparency. Machiavelli just applied that logic to ruling states. The brilliance is how universal the mechanics are. Business negotiations, diplomacy, even competitive sports echo this same pattern. Hide the play until it wins. You don't have to love the ethics to appreciate the effectiveness. So, final challenge. Will you take Machiavelli's advice and guard your plans until the perfect reveal? Or do you still think total openness wins the day? Tell me below. And if you want more dangerous ideas from history's sharpest minds, subscribe. You're officially in my trusted inner circle.